Welcome to Professional Quotient, or PQ. In this podcast, we have conversations that help build our professional equity. I am your host, Jason Winningham, and today we have a very special guest, Beth Sirull, the President and CEO of the National Organization on Disability. Beth, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I would be happy to, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. So as Jason said, my name is Beth Sirull, and I am the President and CEO of the National Organization on Disability. This is actually the third social enterprise that I have had the privilege of leading in my career. The first was called Pacific Community Ventures, a community development financial institution, and we worked on financing and supporting small businesses in historically underestimated communities. And then I ran a community foundation in San Diego, and now I lead the National Organization on Disability. And the thread that kind of runs through all of that is that they're all nonprofits, but they all are social enterprises in the sense that significant amounts of our revenue are earned revenue as opposed to philanthropy. I mean, our whole revenue is a mix of that. And the cause that sort of rolls through all of that is the historically underestimated or various populations of the historically not included. And that's really where my passions lie, because we all need access to capital and access to opportunity, and equity of opportunity is very different than equity of outcome. And I believe in the United States right now, some people, when they hear equity of opportunity, and other people hear equity of outcome. And it's from that differential listening that the conflict around disability, equity, and inclusion has arose.
Absolutely. Now, you shared that you're passionate about that. How did you get into this field to begin with?
Oh, I was raised to care about the downtrodden, or not the downtrodden, but the historically underestimated or marginalized. I grew up in a Jewish household, and my mother used to say that Judaism could be summarized in 3 sentences. We were slaves in Egypt. We were freed. It's our obligation to ensure that no other people suffers a similar fate. And that has stayed with me my whole life. And the other piece, the other thread that runs through, my area of sort of historically underestimated, it's really about economic opportunity for me, that I've really been very involved in promoting and creating access to, equitable access to economic opportunity. And that really stems from a piece of Jewish wisdom from a guy named Maimonides, who was one of Judaism's scholars from, oh, goodness gracious, I'm going to say the 9th or 10th century. Probably wrong. But anyway, he created a hierarchy of charity. And at the very top, the best kind of charity is the charity that enables someone else to support themselves, so that they not only no longer need charity, but they can instead become a contributor.
I love that. That summarizes what I feel about professional development in a nutshell as well, because I feel like the more we rise in our careers and our professions, the more we have an obligation to give back to those by sharing knowledge, which is free to give, and just by lifting others up. So I love that.
Yeah.
Can you share with me what a typical day working in a nonprofit looks like to you?
Oh, I don't think there is such a thing. The biggest part of my job as the CEO of the organization is to make sure that everybody on my team has what they need to do their job, that they are fully empowered and clear about what they need to do, that everybody understands where we're headed and what their role is in getting us there, and that everybody's rowing in the same direction. So I spend a lot of my time coaching my colleagues, but I'm also out there, obviously, talking to funders and policymakers and, spreading what I would call the gospel of disability inclusion, particularly around economic opportunity. That if, no matter who you are and how you're able, if you can't earn a living, your ability to reach your full potential is completely evaporates. It's just not there. And so making sure that everybody who wants to work and can work has access to jobs that leverage their skills is it's critical for those people, but it's also critical for business and critical for our larger economy. It's really a win-win situation. We talk a lot about unlocking human potential and enhancing business performance. And you can't do one without the other.
Absolutely. And I have seen you firsthand when you were at the Dallas Regional Chamber, really working that room too. You have a gift with that, I must say. That's something I'm a little jealous of. I was watching you work the room and just talk with everybody, and I was like, wow, that is a gift.
I'm not sure where I got that, but I thank God for it every day. I never really thought about it as a gift. It's just who I am.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's part of who we are, is finding those gifts along our journey and embracing them. And I find in the professional world, whenever we can align how we're made, how we're built to what we're doing, we're always going to find the greatest success.
That's right. So this is part of my skill set. And so I'm in a job that really leverages my skill set and enables me to reach my full potential and thus help other people reach theirs. And really what NOD is after is trying to ensure that every person with a disability, whether it be a physical disability, neurodiversity, mental health, a cognitive or developmental disability, that everyone has access to economic opportunity that leverages their abilities, whatever those abilities are.
So our professional quotient, our PQ, is how we utilize our personal portfolio of professional equity. And I use equity in the sense that's similar to financial equity, something that we can put deposits on, something that we can reap rewards, something where we can leverage it and invest it. And this is any number of things, from our skills, our knowledge, our education, our experience, and the community of people that we've built up around us, or our network. Out of those things within your portfolio of professional equity, what would you say you value the most?
Right now, and this would have changed. I mean, if you'd asked me this question years ago, obviously it would change. But right now, I'm reminded when I saw this question. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes, which comes from Viktor Frankl, who was a neurologist and psychologist and a Holocaust survivor. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And for me, what I value most right now is that it's taken most of my career to get here, but I most of the time I am able to seize the space between stimulus and response and take that moment to think about what the best response is. And historically, I talk a lot and I'm in a hurry and I want to get things done. And I had a hard time, somebody would say something, that's the stimulus, and I would just respond. And the ability to take in what is happening, what is stimulating you in whatever way, and hear that pause, to seize that pause for just a moment and say, in that space is our power to choose our response, and then to choose that response in a way that's going to work best for everyone engaged in the interaction. And that is how conflict gets resolved before it becomes real conflict.
I like that. I like that a lot. Would you say that these moments of space are really long moments? Or is it just like one of those, it could be an eternal moment within a second?
Well, I mean, obviously it depends on the situation. Sometimes you get an email at the end of the day and you think, oh, I got to respond to that, when really what you need to do is breathe on it and respond to it in the morning, or write your response, but not send it till the next day. Whereas if you're in a conversation with someone at an event, or just, you and I are having a conversation, if someone says something that kind of stimulates you, good or bad, to just take that split second to go, I mean, it's much easier when you're in a conversation that's all positive. It's when you're triggered that this skill becomes really useful. And it's also really useful when you're coaching other people because you can see that they're triggered and you can try and say, okay, wait, take a deep breath. Let's think about what the right response, what's the best response here. So I try to channel Viktor Frankl in my life a lot. And, for some people, seizing the space between stimulus and response comes naturally because they're just much more, just sort of much more measured as human beings. They just have a different cadence in life. My father thought for 20 minutes before he said anything, and then what he said was totally worth listening to. I did not inherit that gene, and I have had to learn to seize that moment between stimulus and response, and it is probably the number one thing that has helped my career.
I love that. And I wrote down seize the space. I would love that quote to just be a little post-it note beside my screen here. I think that's great. Was it challenging to kind of start adopting that?
Oh, it's very hard. Well, the first thing you have to do is recognize that you need to adopt that. And, after you stick your foot in your mouth enough times, and you get yourself in trouble, eventually you're like, oh, maybe I just need to take a deep breath here. I have an intermittent meditation practice that does help seize the space. I do have habits around if I'm going into what I expect to be a difficult conversation, to really take those 10 seconds to take a couple deep breaths, to put my feet flat on the floor and really feel that sense of grounded in who I am and what I need to do. And just to slow my pulse down a little bit, so that I don't react inappropriately. Or it's really about, it's in everybody's best interest to leverage a situation in a way that motivates everybody. That's the mark of a good leader. And no one is able to seize the moment between the stimulus and the response 100% of the time. I mean, everybody loses it every now and then, but I don't lose it very often anymore because I have really worked hard at seizing the moment between the space between the stimulus and the response, and taking that moment to realize that how I respond doesn't have to be how I'm wired to respond naturally, but maybe I can take that moment and think about what the best, most effective response is to the current situation. And that's that opportunity for growth and freedom that Viktor Frankl is talking about.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing a few examples of like taking those moments before walking into a meeting and grounding yourself, because I'm sure there are listeners here that are saying, how do I begin seizing that moment? How? And so that was one example of just, and you also included meditation. You do this regularly. Is that a daily practice?
Not a daily practice. It's an intermittent practice. It should be a daily practice, but no one is perfect. I do have a pretty daily practice around just a little bit of deep breathing and really putting my feet on, when you ground yourself with your feet squarely on the floor and take a deep breath, you put yourself in the moment that you're in, as opposed to worrying about, whatever's going on elsewhere. And when you're in the moment, when you're fully focused on the moment, it is easier to see the space.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that is good advice, not just for the professional world, but for
Oh,
personal
heavens
as well.
no.
My
I mean,
goodness.
it's really the best advice for a parent.
I'm not a parent, so I don't have that experience,
And
but
it has come in extremely handy. And honestly, I was when my child was when my son was young, I wasn't so good at it. Now that he's grown, I'm much better at it. So I wish I had been more skilled at identifying the space between stimulus and response when he was younger. But we do the best we can.
that's life. We always learn things along our way. And that's also one of the points of this particular podcast, is really being able to shout back in time to ourselves almost, but to other people on their journeys and say, hey, learn from me.
And I'm also, you're never done developing your professional equity. Even after you retire, You still want to stay engaged and active, and really we need young people before they're really working to really understand in high school and college what it is to build your professional equity.
Absolutely. Speaking of, are there things that you do on a regular basis or somewhat regular to raise your own professional equity?
I mean, I am constantly out meeting people, which is, and anytime you connect with new people, you're building your network. For me, I have led 3 organizations in 3 very different areas of social change. And so I've met each time, I've expanded my network dramatically because I've gone to learn about a whole new set of issues and causes and methods. And, I think that I had a coach years ago who said that a person needs to be replanted every 7 years. And you can be replanted in the same organization. At least every 7 years, you need to do something entirely fresh. And so that, I have done that, and that has really, I think, added a lot to my professional equity. And each time, you're in a deep learning curve, and you're humble about what you don't know. When you're humble about what you don't know, people are happy to teach you.
Absolutely. I find that that's even more the case within the nonprofit sphere where people are really willing to help teach. And I don't, I have my own theories on why that might be. Apart from the fact that in the nonprofit space, we're already more kind hearted or are really looking to help. But I think it's because there's always so much work to be done that we're always appreciative of anybody that wants to help. So we're willing to teach.
Well, and I think we also recognize that, in the vast majority of nonprofits, there's very little redundance on a team. Whereas in large corporate America, someone goes out on a leave or someone gets sick, there tends to be more ability to cover. And in the nonprofit sector, we don't have redundancy. Therefore, it's just really important that your colleagues really know what they need to know to do what they need to do if you get hit by a bus.
Absolutely, absolutely, so that everything doesn't just stop, and I mean, we want to be, paying our respects for the person that got hit by the bus, so we might pause, but the work has to keep going, unfortunately, so yes, so and I thought it was very similar within the corporate world. There are usually some, like, employee resource groups or employee communities, and while these aren't typically set up as nonprofits. Some are, but while they typically aren't, this too is kind of a volunteer space.
100%. I mean, they're generally within the core, an ERG or a BRG, business resource group, depending on what a company calls them. They're really affinity groups, and they're volunteer opportunities for like-minded folks. And they create and grow and enhance feelings of community and belonging within an organization. And the sense of belonging is what creates psychological safety. And psychological safety is what empowers employees to take risks and to innovate. And if you want your team to be innovative and creative and solve, problems are coming at your business a million miles an hour, you need your team to be innovative and creative and willing to take smart risks. They have to feel psychologically safe or they won't do it. And belonging is a key. Feeling that level of support from your peers is what enables you to take those risks.
Absolutely, and it creates these opportunities where we can really learn more, grow more, because when we enter into whether it's a nonprofit or an ERG or a BRG, there are people that want to support you, that want to teach you. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for people to dip their toes into something new. So with comms or marketing or whatnot. Yeah.
And everybody can teach us something. Even the 22-year-old right out of college can teach us lots of things. And indeed, when it comes to technology and social media, they can, there's a lot of reverse mentoring that can go on if you're open to it. There's a book called Wisdom at Work, I believe, Chip Conley, The Making of a Modern Elder. And he talks about the phrase mentern, which is to be a mentor and an intern at the same time, because we're all learning new things, but we also, as we age, have wisdom to share with the people who are coming up behind us. And I like that term a lot.
I do too. That's a really good. I have not yet heard that term, but I like that
Like
a
that.
lot.
I
I'm a
like to think of myself as a modern elder.
nice. I like it. I like
Wisdom.
it.
Like to leverage the wisdom that I've gained in my years.
And we should. So with that, is there advice you would give to someone who's maybe just starting off their career or considering a career pivot and would like to be more involved in the nonprofit space as their day to day?
It's really important to do work that leverages your skills and that aligns with your values. And corporations are increasingly finding when they go to hire particularly younger people want to work in organizations that align with their values. The sooner you can develop your own self-awareness in life, the better off you are. And I was not particularly good at that in my 20s. I didn't really get that till my 40s. But, I try to tell young people, really pay attention to who you are and understand how your brain works and what your value system is, and look for something that aligns with that, and go meet people who have values like yours and see what they're doing, and talk to them, and people will want, when you meet someone whose values align with whose values align with yours and yours align with theirs, they will want to help you. Earlier in life, you can learn to be vulnerable and share who you are, even when you're a little scared. I'm a proponent of, we talk about self ID in the disability space. And, it is risky sometimes to own up to the disability that to identify as someone with a disability. And many times, a disability is most of the time, a disability is not visible. And many Americans think of disability as the person in the wheelchair. And clearly that person does have a disability, but so does the person who's neurodiverse or has crippling anxiety or has had cancer or is diabetic or has any impairment of any kind that limits their activities in some way, or that they need some adjustment to be able to grapple with. If you're interviewing for a job and a company doesn't want to accommodate and adjust and adapt so that you can thrive in a job, you don't really want to work there. And you got to believe in yourself that your skills are enough, that the right place is out there. Just keep looking. And I recognize that there's a difference between your career job and if you're a young person, especially, there's a difference between your career job and paying the bills jobs. And I realize it can be a real privilege to be able to work to find the job that you really want in your career. And sometimes you have to do things in the meantime to pay the bills. But don't lose sight of your dream and be who you are to pursue that dream. Because otherwise you either A, won't achieve it, or B, you'll get there and you won't appreciate, you won't be what you thought it was going to be, because you're not able to really be who you are.
It's similar with friendships. If you or dating world, if you pretend to be who you think they want to be friends with or get to know, you're not actually getting to know them, and they're not actually getting to know you. They're getting to know your mask. And as somebody who had carried many masks over my life until it was really, it wasn't until my mid-30s when I discovered that I'm on this neurodivergent spectrum because of a family member going through that diagnosis. And it was such a breath of fresh air in a way of like this, oh my goodness, this explains everything. And at the same time, there was almost a grieving of the lost time for not having tools and that self-acceptance early on. But what I can personally attest to is once you do claim yourself, you're able to do so much more than you ever were before when you were trying to put on those masks. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing over at NOD, National Organization on Disability, for those that don't know the acronym. Would you like to share a little bit of a spotlight about what NOD is doing and let our listeners know?
So the National Organization on Disability is committed to ensuring that every person with a disability has access to compelling job opportunities so that they can fulfill the full potential of their life. And we work towards that mission, really working with organizations to enable them and to show them that hiring people with disabilities is really good for business. As we say, we're unlocking human potential and we're enhancing business performance. And people with disabilities, by and large, they're very resourceful and creative and innovative and resilient because they've had to be. We have had to be. We have had to navigate our way in a world that isn't entirely created in a way that works for us. And we've had to find workarounds, and we've had to be resilient when we get rejected. Those are skill sets that employers really need. And at the same time, employers need to understand how to eliminate bias in hiring processes, how to write a job description that doesn't eliminate people with a disability, how to make sure when they're screening resumes that they don't automatically screen out somebody inadvertently because that person has a disability, how to, how to interview appropriately for the kind of job that you're offering. We talk a lot about skills that are essential to a job and skills that are a nice to have. And so, if you are in sales, then, being able to be outgoing and, that firm handshake and the looking in the eyes and, being all animated, that's an important skill in sales. It's not an important skill in coding or in maintenance work or necessarily in construction, or in lots of good paying jobs don't require that. And yet often when we're interviewing people, we're looking for that, that ability. And that really disadvantages people who are more introverted. It disadvantages the neurodiverse. Those people can come to a position that they're well suited, that their skill set is well suited to, and do it much better than the person who maybe was, so outgoing. It's sort of like, sometimes the skills that it takes to get a job are not at all correlated with the skills that it takes to do the job. And so we want companies to make sure that they're evaluating the skills that it takes to do the job, because when you do that, you will hire more people who are better able to do the jobs that you need. And some of those people will be people, with disabilities. We work with companies around developing accommodations processes that are efficient and affordable and work for the company and for employees. We work around identifying bias and eliminating bias and understanding disability awareness and etiquette. And really, we integrate disability inclusion into every aspect of the employee life cycle, from the recruiting to the interviewing, the onboarding, the retaining, the promoting, the developing. There are lots of organizations out there around the country that are training people with disabilities, like vocational rehab, and that are training people with disabilities for jobs. But if companies are not willing to hire, then it doesn't get us anywhere. So we're really working on creating that demand rather than the supply, if you will. We're very focused right now on the growing mess, for lack of a better word, that is mental health in America today, that is afflicting just an overwhelming number of workers. And, while having a job can be a source of relief to to stress and anxiety, it can also be a big exacerbator. If you are a frontline worker who's distracted because of a mental health challenge, that's really dangerous. So we're really working with companies around training managers to understand and spot mental health challenges when they see them on their team, and to know how to have those difficult conversations and to try and steer people on their team to some help. We do a lot of work around digital accessibility. 95% of the internet is not accessible to people who are vision impaired. And obviously, most jobs are applied to online. If you can't get to the website and access it, you can't apply for a job. You can't get a job that you can't apply for. We're really, NOD is trying to shape capitalism so that it works for everybody.
Well, and it's really like shaping capitalism to understand that they're missing out on so much, because when you are overlooking the qualified candidates because you found a qualified interviewee, somebody that knows how to go into that interview and knock it out of the ballpark, whether they have any passion for that job or not, the companies are losing out on their best talent.
That's right. There's a big untapped talent pool out there in people with disabilities, and we want to see it tapped. The unemployment rate among people with disabilities is significantly higher, generally around twice that of the non-disabled, and the labor force participation rate is about half. Really what we're working to do at NOD is to transform people from tax consumers to taxpayers. People complain about paying their taxes, but really it's a huge privilege that you have the ability to pay your taxes.
That is a great way to look at that, Beth.
Because that means that you're earning money.
Yeah.
And if you're paying more taxes this year, it's because you earned more money.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are a lot of people out there who would give anything to be making money so they could pay their share of taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a bipartisan issue. We all want people to transform from tax consumers to taxpayers.
Absolutely. The disability community is one of those communities that anybody can enter into at any point in their life.
Oh, it doesn't discriminate at all.
And absolutely.
The statistics on this, are really not good. Because everybody, different definitions of a disability. Some studies look at, your whole life, 0 to death. Others are just looking at adults, and adult is sometimes over 18 and sometimes over 6. It just, it's very difficult to really get at firm statistics. We believe that almost every American will either have a disability at some point in their life or will care for someone who does. So disability will touch virtually every American. It's not a minority majority issue. It's a human issue.
Absolutely. And for any listener that is wondering how you might go into the disability community if you weren't born into it, well, you could lose your hearing over time. You could get in a car accident and become paralyzed. There are a million and one different ways.
We could all walk out the front door tomorrow and fall and hit our head.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We could all have a stroke tomorrow. We could, God forbid, be diagnosed with cancer tomorrow. And we could lose our sight. We could lose our hearing. We could become physically disabled. We could have a traumatic event in our life and then, have, trauma-induced mental health. You don't generally acquire neurodiversity in your life. You are born that way. But you often will learn later in life that that's who you are. And then, some of the resources out there can be really helpful.
That's certainly happening right now because there's more and more knowledge coming out about it. Hopefully, the next few generations won't have that same issue because hopefully they will have the tools and resources they need at a younger age. I really hope. And I really, one of the things you mentioned was that self-ID. And I know that there are some hesitations that people have within our community for sure with that, because there are a lot of stigmas attached to both disabilities and mental health. And it's one of the things that the more that we talk about it and the more that we socialize and normalize the conversation about it, the more helpful it will be for everyone. But it's something that we're still in that zone where, like, this conversation here is valuable and needed because not everybody's having this conversation.
That's right. That's right. And all the things that we've talked about today are good for people with disabilities, but they're really good for everybody. It's in everybody's, it's inclusive design. It's just making the world work for everyone. We call that the curb cut effect.
The curb cut effect. Yes. Explain that to us.
The curb cut in the sidewalk was something that was done to, to accommodate wheelchairs. But it turns out that runners love it and parents love it when they have strollers, and bikers like it. Older people like it, even if they don't have a disability. It's just a good practice.
It ended up benefiting more than the intended audience, so to speak.
That's right. And the reverse is also true, that some things that are invented to assist the people with disabilities, everybody tends to love, will come to love. Closed captioning in your Zoom, in your Zoom meetings, that was designed for people who are hearing impaired. But now lots and lots of people turn it on because it helps them focus in a Zoom meeting. And when you're on Zoom meetings all day long, that's really important.
Oh, it's so helpful. That was going to be the one that I brought up, because the curb cut effect was one that really helped a lot. And those closed captionings helped me when I was on international calls. It helps even decipher different dialects or different accents. And it's just so helpful for the ADHD brain to really read along and keep up. And so that too is an inclusive design example. And I love that. And I love that we're really pushing that narrative by having nonprofits like the National Organization on Disability just up and running. And if someone, let's say they're working in HR or operations and they're listening to this, how would they go about hearing or getting connected with NOD so that they could make sure those practices are in their workplaces?
Well, you could go to nod.org. We're in the middle of revamping our entire website, or you can just write to me, CirillB@nod.org. My last name, my first initial at nod.org.
Is there anything else, Beth, that you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
Take your chances in life, be vulnerable, be a creative, be an intelligent risk taker. That will build your professional equity. But a risk taking is important as the be a smart risk taker. That does not mean run across the street when the traffic is coming, thinking you can dodge the cars. Don't be afraid to offer your ideas. And if you're working in a place where you offer an idea and you get shut down repeatedly, they're not leveraging your skills. Time to move on.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Beth. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please like and subscribe. And if you're willing, please leave a positive review. And remember, just like our IQ and our EQ, we have a PQ, and that professional quotient can always easily be raised. We just have to keep learning, building, and connecting. Until next time.